The use of performance-enhancing drugs has been going on for decades, and it's widely known that abusing them can lead to serious health problems, especially causing damage to the kidneys, liver, and heart, which can ultimately lead to death. The result of this has been seen every so often on the news over the years, but over the past couple of years, there seems to have been a large uptick in the number of athletes dying suddenly at young ages. Is this the result of higher drug use from the plethora of options today, or perhaps the rise of social media putting pressure on people to look a certain way, as well as a 24/7 stream of news to everyone's phones, making us more aware of these occurrences? Or is there possibly something else going on with a new widely used drug that nobody is talking about that could be causing these untimely deaths? When looking back to December of 2020, a new untested drug was introduced to the market, which was encouraged for people worldwide to take in order to protect them from a pandemic-starting disease. And yes, you can say it's a bit of a stretch to call it a PED. However, we're constantly told that
they protect quite well against severe disease leading to hospitalization and death.
That means it is enhancing our body's performance against a disease. So let's take a look at actual facts and see how this is likely the cause of so many deaths in athletes. The published documentation on side effects from the company state that myocarditis and pericarditis, which is inflammation of the heart and of the outer lining of the heart, are known risks when taking this drug. This gives us some insight as to why this affects so many athletes compared to the average person. If you're mostly sedentary, then this inflammation may not even be noticeable because there isn't much stress on your heart. But when a top-level athlete whose heart is being pushed to the limit in sports constantly gets heart inflammation, this can present itself as a heart attack, which we have seen be the cause of so many athletes collapsing on the field. But it doesn't stop there. Embalmers have been having difficulty with injecting embalming fluid throughout the body because they've been discovering bright white fibrous clots that are multiple feet in length and make a direct cast in the arteries.
I'm really alarmed. What is this? I've never seen this before in 15 years. I've got a British Institute of Embalmers registered embalmer who works here full time. He's never seen that before in 20 years. So all these athletes and footballers and people that you're seeing, their arteries are full of that. And that's what we're seeing with all these footballers and athletes in record numbers that are dying suddenly.
And how exactly are these clots and heart inflammation leading to increasing amounts of sudden death in young people? Cardiologist Peter McCullough explains
the hypothesis that the vaccine sets up the heart inflammation, which can be very subtle. In fact, some of it can have no symptoms whatsoever. And then it's the big surge of adrenaline during a soccer game or during a basketball game, during sports, that's triggering these deaths. And boy, that theory fits.
And when mentioning the possibility of this previously worldwide mandatory shot being a possible cause of deaths in the bodybuilding community, I've seen a lot of backlash comments of things like, "Get real, these guys are blasting all kinds of drugs that are killing them." Yes, that is very true, but it also helps drive home my point of the shot being a contributor. Bodybuilders have been taking these drugs for decades to help build massive muscular physiques, and though I'm sure the doses have continued to increase over the past 20 years to push the envelope even more, we really haven't seen a whole lot of deaths over that time period. But when you combine heart inflammation and clots along with the already damaged organs from abusive PED doses, that makes the possibility of heart attacks and strokes even higher at younger and younger ages. And it's not just bodybuilders. Athletes in their 20s and 30s of sports from soccer, football, swimming, and even teenagers in high school sports are dying from cardiac arrest, or more commonly referred to as sudden unknown causes. And when those extremely healthy athletes who have survived one of these episodes are asked what caused this to happen, rather than giving an answer that can help other people look for those same markers in their own bodies, we get cryptic responses like this.
How did doctor describe what happened to you? That's something I want to stay away from.
And you know that these are not some kind of pre-existing condition because athletes getting multi-million-dollar contracts are definitely having very in-depth health screenings before being brought on board by a team. After more research, Dr. McCullough claimed that 1,598 athletes suffered cardiac events since January of 2021 compared to only 1,101 over the previous 38 years. I even met a guy at my gym who told me he had had a stroke while working out one morning after having had the shot the previous evening. And you may be thinking, come on, I would have heard about this by now. Well, not if you're only watching mainstream news.
CNN Tonight, brought to you by Pfizer.
America is brought to you by Pfizer.
CBS Health Watch, sponsored by Pfizer.
ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Pfizer.
Anderson Cooper 360. Brought to you by Pfizer. Early Start. Brought to you by Pfizer. Friday night on Aaron Burnett Out Front. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Today's countdown to the royal wedding is brought to you by Pfizer.
And now a CBS Sports Update brought to you by Pfizer.
And it's not just in the world of sports anymore. More and more problems have been coming up in the world of aviation, which I'm quite in tune with because it's what I do for a living. There have been numerous reports of pilots from multiple airlines suffering from heart attacks or other cardiac events leading to emergency landings. Even on the military side, where members were forced to get the shot to keep their jobs, there have been military pilots showing positive markers for myocarditis when tested. And obviously the military isn't going to report this information to the public or even to its own members. But what's more interesting is that back in October of 2022, the FAA quietly widened the EKG range for pilots in their medical testing to keep their medical certificates without restrictions. And this much wider range basically accommodates people who have cardiac injury without having to ground them based on the previous standards. And speaking of being grounded, FAA medical examiners have guidance not to issue medical certificates to applicants who have used a drug that the FDA has approved less than 12 months ago. Knowing that pilots who had taken the shot should have been grounded along with the recently widened EKG parameters and pilots having heart attacks, you may start thinking twice before boarding your next flight. And rather than letting people know about the known published dangers of the drug, instead we are inundated with ads to try to normalize all these new problems we see that are causing sudden death.
But one day I had a stomachache so bad I didn't want to do anything. The team at New York Presbyterian said it was actually my heart. It was severely swollen, something called myocarditis. But doctors gave me medicines and used machines to control my heartbeat. They saved me.
As if children having myocarditis is a normal thing, but how then do we explain the problems that kids are experiencing from myocarditis? Even though millions of kids grew up playing video games like GoldenEye, Halo, and Call of Duty, apparently now multiplayer war games can trigger deadly heart problems in children. Climate change is also being linked to sudden cardiovascular deaths, and that can be for either very hot days or very cold days. There's also long COVID to blame for sudden deaths, even though new studies are being published showing that there is no long COVID, rather it's a continual sickness being induced from breathing your own germs and bacteria constantly from masks. And don't forget that skipping your shot now apparently puts you at a higher risk of traffic accidents. And with the published side effects of the shots, the minimization of VAERS reporting of injuries and deaths, and all the information that continually comes out about problems in all these groups of people.
Why, when we've got a serious adverse event rate, which is probably in the range of at least 1 in 800 to 1 in 1,000 from good quality data, why is it not being pulled when other vaccines, swine flu vaccine 1976 was pulled because it caused Guillain-Barré syndrome in 1 in 100,000. Rotavirus vaccine was pulled in 1999 because it caused a form of bowel obstruction in 1 in 10,000. We're talking of serious adverse events of 1 in 800.
But not when it comes to the COVID so-called vaccine. And I say it that way because the CDC actually changed the definition of vaccination and vaccine so that they could still call the COVID shot a vaccine. Prior to September of 2021, the CDC defined vaccination as the act of introducing a vaccine into the body to produce immunity to a specific disease. Now the word immunity has been switched to protection. The term vaccine also changed from a product that stimulates a person's immune system to produce immunity to a specific disease to a preparation that is used to stimulate the body's immune response against diseases. What does that even mean? Stimulate an immune response? That could be a negative immune response, and of course all this happened quite conveniently close to when the FDA approved this shot for use. And if it is so well tested, proving that it's
safe and they're highly effective.
This vaccine is very safe and it's very effective.
They are safe and effective.
Then why would the FDA request 75 years to release nearly 500,000 pages of Pfizer vaccine data to the public? A time that would basically be after this current generation of lab rats will all be dead. Why would they do all this just to continue pushing and even encourage the mandating of a drug that is likely causing so much harm? It's all about the money. Pfizer's overall revenue doubled in 2021 to $81 billion and hit a new record in 2022 of $100 billion. And although 55% of the FDA's budget comes from federal funding, the other 45% is collected from fees to drug makers seeking approval and paying for the drug review process, although they claim that that has no bearing on the outcome of the approval decision. The CDC also collects tens of millions from companies like Pfizer, Biogen, and Merck through the CDC Foundation, which is hardly a drop in the bucket when considering the tens of billions in revenue revenue from Pfizer alone. Then FDA, NIH, and CDC officials move into the private sector and become board members of Pfizer, or join Moderna, or join the Rockefeller Foundation. And who's paying for all these COVID shots since they're supposedly free? Well, your tax dollars are going to the companies that are paying the regulatory agencies, which are also funded by your tax dollars, as well as those companies making mind-blowing revenues from the drugs. And when asked,
can you tell me that you have not received a royalty from any entity that you ever oversaw the distribution of money in research grants?
According to the regulations, people who receive royalties are not required to divulge them.
So everyone benefits, except of course for your health, which is supposedly the basis of all this. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, I got it and I'm fine, and that is great. I am not here hoping for people to get hurt from it, nor do I want people to die. But with so many adverse effects already, who knows what the long-term problems will be? There's already been a large uptick in brain aneurysms in people in their 20s and 30s, and even with high schoolers. And there have also been a large number of newscasters worldwide passing out or showing stroke symptoms while live on the air. And if you still think that you can trust the science and all the leaders who've been encouraging you to get more and more shots, let's take a little trip down memory lane to see how the narrative has changed.
There are lots of people with infections who have no symptoms who are spreading the virus and getting other people infected.
People can spread the virus even if they don't have symptoms, correct?
That's right.
I wouldn't demand to be mandatory. It's like I don't think masks have to be made mandatory nationwide.
Mandate the mask. Man, say this is what you have to do when you're out.
You wear this mask, you'll save more lives between now and the end of the year than if we had a vaccine. You don't have to lock down if you're wearing the mask.
Vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick.
Even if you don't want to, get your vaccine so you don't ever kill anybody with COVID. Yes, it will protect you, but honestly, it's not for you. It's so you don't kill other people. It's so you don't spread it to other people.
You're okay. You're not gonna get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
3 people fully vaccinated reinfected with COVID. That's not necessarily a bad thing if you got the vaccine, because the vaccine keeps you from going to the hospital.
And even if you do get a breakthrough infection when you're vaccinated, the chances of your transmitting it to someone else is exceedingly low.
We'll see some fully vaccinated people get COVID, potentially in large numbers. Even if you're fully vaccinated, you should wear a mask.
Vaccine plus a booster don't protect overly well, as it were, against infection. They protect quite well against severe disease leading to hospitalization and death.
And if you're fully vaccinated, get one more COVID shot. Once a year. That's it.
So we're now told that the whole point of it was always to keep you from getting really sick and preventing hospitalization and death. But how can you prove that when the whole thing started with you needing to get it because so many people are asymptomatic? That means that people have the disease and it's not affecting them. If you have to be coerced into getting something, then there's probably information that's being hidden from you. But don't trust me on this. Trust your doctor. Or maybe not, because there's definitely financial incentive for them to push these on you. Go do your own research from both sides of the issue and make informed decisions. And links for everything I've talked about are in the description for you to see for yourself. And the reason I'm covering this on my fitness channel is because I talk about being as healthy as possible, and this has serious health implications. And if you disagree, that is perfectly fine, but if you're gonna comment, please do so with factual, researched evidence rather than how you feel based on what the bought-off media has been telling you. Because in the end, facts don't care about your feelings. So stay healthy, and I'll see you soon.
Get vaccinated.